Hello and welcome to Rediscovering You. Today I am thrilled to introduce to you Becca Stackhouse-Morson. Becca founded Stacked Intent to empower individuals to improve self-care and personal growth. With a background in family studies and certifications in various fields, Becca combines academic knowledge with practical experience. Through her authenticity and expertise, she inspires others to embrace change and live authentically, offering actionable insights through speaking engagements and workshops. Hello, Becca. Welcome to the show. I am thrilled to have you here today.
Hello, I'm really excited to be here and have our conversation today.
Great. I was hoping you could start by just sharing a little bit about your personal or professional background, whatever you're feeling guided to share to start out.
I think they kind of are one and the same sometimes because my personal background kind of fueled what my drive became professionally of that healthy relationship of kind of seeing that I grew up in an environment that gave me the tools for healthy relationship and what it could look like and what to kind of expect. And then as I went into my education and the coursework and then the internships that just kind of showed where people don't get. I remember I had to do an observation and I did it at a pregnancy center. And it was eye-opening because there was this girl who had not known this guy very long, but then they were pregnant. And they had only known each other for less than like 30 days.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was like, wow. And then when I worked in my career before I launched my business, I worked a lot with the middle schoolers and their idea. I had one little girl tell me one time who would have been sixth or seventh grade of that she had to have a baby to be successful in a relationship. And it's like, that's not true. And so I found within my own like friendships, relationships, and then my own of like, no, it's okay to have a healthy version of yourself. Like it does you need that healthy whole you before you put into other relationships. And so it's kind of who I am is I just really think it's important to understand who we are with ourselves and the
Mm.
relationship that we have with ourselves before or if we're already in relationships, but understanding that so that we can then vocalize what we need to the other people in our life because we can't if we don't understand what we need, they're definitely not going to understand what we need. And so if we can't recognize that, then we have struggle there. And so that's where I think it's important. And so it kind of intertwines professionally and personally of like, I think it's all around important to have that healthy self relationship because that's what kind of branches into the rest of everything that we do.
This is so true. Absolutely. You need to understand who you are, be in touch with what your values are and what's important to you, and have a wonderful relationship with yourself before you're able to have these really fulfilling interpersonal relationships with other people. And, I think it's important that you brought up working with children at the middle school level. I can relate to that in my own professional background of working with young girls who are looking at their identity and basing it on what it means to somebody else or what somebody else sees them as being valued for, which is really, really heartbreaking to me that that's, where a lot of people are coming from. And it does translate into adulthood for so many people. So for you personally, it seems like you're at a point in your life where you've mastered the importance of knowing, having a great self relationship. Did you always have that, or was it something that you discovered that this is really important and I need to look at this at a certain point in your life? Where did that unfold for you?
I've always had it to some extent. And it's what I've really been able to reflect on, especially in like the transitions I've had recently of it came from my environment. It came from my parents and the environment that we grew up in. We were allowed to vocalize what we needed. Sometimes it was my parents, this is what we say, this is what we're doing, but we were also allowed to vocalize a need we wanted. Food. I'm full. I don't want to finish what I have. Okay. But that
Mm,
doesn't mean you get to turn around in 20 minutes and have something else because if
mhm.
this was what dinner was. And so I've always kind of had it. And then at some point, my brother told me and my little sister that we should be friends with guys, like focus on a friendship, not necessarily wanting to just you don't want to be the girl that's all over them because most guys, if it's a guy that wants that, he's not necessarily the good guy that you need. And so that carried into really understanding who I was and what I wanted in somebody.
Mhm.
Of okay, because like watching girls, watching movies, our society, and like really looking at it, totally basing what you want off of what somebody else wants to do. I just never found that appealing. Of like, if I don't not interested in it, then I'm not going to pretend to be interested in it just because I want you. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. And so I've always had some of that. I'm wanting to really understand myself and know what I want. I would say that I've faced some challenges in it of like when me and my husband got married, we got married and then we also changed careers, moved states, sold a house, like all the six big things you can do in life. We did them all at one time in like a 3 month span. And so I struggled in that of like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I'm not in a career anymore. I'm still doing something I love because I launched my business in that transition, but I'm now not seeing people day to day. I'm an entrepreneur, and so I spend more time by myself. Well, when you've spent 6 years in a community where you talk to people all day long and you enjoy it, that's a hard transition. And so it was finding, so how do I give some of that back to myself? Or my biggest one that I had to find was my journaling and my devotional time. Since I was like 8 years old, I used to do it at night. I'd tell my parents good night and then probably stay up another 2 hours doing it and then go to bed. Well, when I got married, that was a hard time to do it because that was when me and my husband could talk and connect. And so it took me a year and a half to kind of figure out where that could realign in my day. So
Mhm.
now I do it more in the morning after he's left for work because that's what works. And so, but I think that was it, is it I knew that was important to me. I just had to figure out where it realigned in my day. And so I've kind of always had part of, okay, these are the things that are important to me. Okay, this can shift some because it needs to. Okay, but an example of something that can't, like, so my food. I have Crohn's. And so there are times that I seem to eat at weird hours. Like I eat lunch at like 10:30 and dinner at like 4:30, but that's because what's what worked better, like in my jujitsu schedule. And so if I'd eat after jujitsu, I wasn't eating dinner until like 9:30 at night. Well,
Mhm.
that didn't work. I was starving. And so it became okay, during the week, we're not going to eat together. It just
Mhm.
doesn't work. And so that was one that became a non-negotiable of it doesn't work to do that. Whereas, okay, my journal time can shift because I can do that at a time
Mhm.
that you're not home versus a time that we can sit here and talk.
So I love that you are talking about identifying different priorities in your life and
Mhm.
realizing what are negotiables for you, what are non-negotiable, non also being able to put them in a higher hierarchy of what do I really value the most and what am I going to make that like my North Star for today that it needs to get done. Like maybe for you that you need to get your journaling done in the morning and in order to know that you're going to be centered and grounded and feel fulfilled. And then finding time for maybe having connection with your husband where maybe you can share a meal or finding a time that works for you, that might be something that you can talk with him about and be able to come up with a consensus together so that you're both happy.
Yeah, and so I think when you go back to is it something I've always known? It's something I've always known. Is it easy to practice all the time? No, because especially when you're introducing a new partner into your life, you have to learn how to communicate it in a way that it doesn't come across mean or
Mhm.
negative. Like you have to come away across in a way that it's like, okay, these are my needs. But in that same breath, you have to respect what they say their needs are too. Of like, okay, I can vocalize what I need, but you have to vocalize what you need
So
too.
true.
And
Mhm.
so that's where I think it becomes really important in that healthy self relationship of you have to be able to take what somebody else needs just as well as you're hoping that they take what you need.
And communication is key, being able to not only effectively communicate in a respectful way and not in a mean way, but also be able to equally receive the information as equally valuable and figure out how you can integrate the both so that you're both happy and have a wonderful
Mhm.
relationship
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about, because you mentioned you'd had a lot of changes all at once. So starting a business with your husband while also doing these moves, can you talk about what were some of the most, or maybe the most challenging piece of that?
So we got married in March, and then in June, we decided it was a really good time to sell a house. And so I owned a house, and we decided to sell my house. Well, that came with we had to have a job change, house move, move states. And then in that, I decided instead of me going back to a job, we decided to go ahead and launch my business then. And so in that, we spent so I worked a career that our calendars were planned out for a year,
Mhm.
like a year in advance. And so I had certain things on my calendar that was like, yeah, I could have just put in a 2 week notice and left, but that wouldn't sit right with me because it was like they were things I had spent 6 years building.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to finish them out. And so that meant that but he had to move because of the career he's in. He had to go ahead and start his job. And so we spent 3 months living in two different places because he had to go ahead and start his new job while I was finishing up with my career. And so that was challenging because then you're balancing only seeing each other short periods of
Mhm.
time and you've only been married for 3 months. I laugh because and then we recently did the same thing. We moved and he changed jobs again. And so we spent a few months apart. I laugh because it's like we spent more time apart than we married than we ever did, like dating or engaged, because it's just how it's had
Yeah.
to work. And so I think that's the challenging of just accepting how it has to work, but being able to move forward with it in a positive way. And then launching a business when you've gone from that career of, and I loved my career. I was a county extension agent and I had a ton of fun. I got to do programming, meet community needs, and it was just fun. And I was at a point that I had worked there for 6 years. And so I had built programs that I repeated every year. And so they had different seasons that those programs happened. And so I think that was part of my hard was leaving it and knowing that it wouldn't be done the same way as I left. Some of it wouldn't be picked back up just because of the way that job is. It's designed to the agent that works it. And so that was hard. But in the same breath, it was really exciting because I was launching and taking parts of my education that I loved and continuing to get to use it because I have a back. Everything I've done in my education has worked into my careers in really, really good ways.
Can you talk a bit about what your mission is with the business that you've created and what inspired you to infuse not just your personal background, but your professional experiences to create what is uniquely yours with your business?
So, Act Intent was created to help individuals become the best, most authentic version of themselves. And so my business is based on, I have my certification for family life education. And that is, it's kind of let me help you give you preventative tools and tactics to help you build healthy family, healthy self. It's family life, but it's really focuses on that individual person all the way out to your family system. And it's what your family system is. It's not necessarily what our nucleus is described of one mother, one father,
Mhm.
one the children, which is what it's defined as in some books, but that looks different for everybody sometimes because you may not have both parents. So you may not have this or that. And so it's whatever your nucleus is what it really looks at. And so I've built my business on providing tools, strategies, and the inspiration so that individuals can be able to make those powerful decisions with their personal growth and their self care with that simple idea that when you're a healthy you, it affects every other aspect of your life in a positive way. Because when you take care of yourself, then you can turn around and take care of your kids or take care of your parents or take care of wherever you have this other place you've got to take care of. Because it's that whole thing of you can't pour from being completely empty. And so if you haven't taken the time for the self care that you need, and self care, it's not necessarily, I need a massage. Self care can be, I need the countertops to not be cluttered. So everything needs to be put away. Or the dishes, I don't go to bed with the dishes in the sink dirty. Like that's self-care. Like it can
Mhm.
be as simple as things like that as being self-care and being able to take care of that and being able to have that healthy version of yourself.
It's beautiful, empowering people that you're working with to identify what it is for them to truly take care of themselves, to have a wonderful sense of self-love and do the things that they need. And I love that example of having a clean counter or getting the dishes off of your sink because I know, like for me, I can't have a great night's sleep if I know that there's a huge pile of dirty dishes in my sink that when I wake up in the morning, that's what I'm going to come down to. It's just, it sounds simple, but things like that really can make a difference. Can you talk about what are some of the clients that are typically drawn to working with you in their business? Do they have any similar presenting concerns or how do they find you?
A lot of times it's people that are ready to love their life that they live every day and they're tired of living just chaos day to day. And it's really looking at that, building some self awareness and building not just that, but like they've lost themselves in some way. Either they lost it in a transition, because I've had people in my workshops or clients all the way from people that are just transitioning out of high school to people that are transitioning to becoming empty nesters
Mhm.
or people that are transitioning to becoming grandparents. And so it's it's a lot of times people that are in a transition and
Mhm.
trying to they've either lost themselves somewhere along the way or they're just ready for something different and they're ready to love what they're doing. I mean, I had a workshop one time and a lady came in and she was so totally against boundaries when she came in and we were talking about boundaries and how boundaries worked. And by the end of the workshop, and we found out it was just how boundaries had been presented to her by people in her life. And so we came at to find out that's what it was. And so by the end, when she kind of understood where they might be coming from with boundaries, she had a whole different outlook on it. And she was really excited about what she was
Mhm.
coming to next. And so it's helping people like that, of like really looking at what your relationship with yourself looks like. And sometimes people don't even realize that's an important relationship because when we hear relationship in our society, romantic is what has been like tagged with it.
Oh,
Like movies show that,
yeah.
TV shows, our music, if you grew up in a certain environment. And so it's understanding that relationship goes much more beyond just romantic. It's the relationship with other people, it's the relationship with food, it's your relationship with your exercise, your finances. And so it's really helping people look and define what relationship actually looks.
Yeah, that's so important because I agree with you. Relationship, the number one thing that most people think about is your romantic relationship and then maybe
Mhm.
friends or maybe family. Definitely not relationship with exercise or relationship with finances or, oh my God, relationship with self. What is that? That sounds weird. But
Yeah.
it's like the cornerstone once you get it like you do and you realize how like central it's not like a oh it's nice to have a good relationship with yourself like no it is imperative that you have a great relationship with yourself. So for somebody listening that right now that's like, okay, this is kind of new to me and I don't really know where to start or what to do, can you give like some really tangible one or two things that somebody can do to try to rediscover who they are, rediscover what their core values are, and try to start to take steps to be more in alignment with their true self, not what society says they should be doing, but their true self.
One, start with reflecting on what do you want your day to look like? Because, and I say that of like, yeah, there are some things we don't have control of. You may have to be at work at a certain time or have your kids to school at a specific time or this or that. But what do you really want to enjoy out of your day? And what do you want to make sure is incorporated in it? And so I'd start with writing it out. You don't necessarily have to journal, but just take a blank piece of paper and write out what you want your ideal work day to look like, and then your ideal weekend to look like, and then you have control of what those look like. And so I'd start there
Can you
because
talk about
then, sorry, go ahead.
why is it important to write it out?
because then you actually see what you're thinking. Like, so I've always found that when I journal, I see it so much better than if I just try to think through it. Because when you write it, it becomes a lot more tangible and you're able to write out every possibility because you could write out four different ways you want a day to go and then come down to what it's really going to look like. But it's being able to take control of that. That's where I would start. Is writing out, figuring out what you want your day to look like, and then figuring out what you want to incorporate in. How do you want meals to look? How do you, because like for me, meals, when I was single and living by myself, I found that it's really hard to cook for one person. Like it's
Mhm.
really hard to cook a meal that just feeds. So I just started cooking for like, okay, how many meals will this make? 10? Okay. I really only want to eat it like 4 times. So then I'd freeze the rest of it and then I would have a month's worth of food ready. And so I
Mhm.
really only had to cook once every 3 or 4 weeks. And that so then you're only having to make that mess once every and when you're cooking for one person, it makes it easier because then making dishes every day for one person is a miserable
It's a
thing to do.
lot.
So it's the things like that or exercise. What do you want your exercise to look like? What is feasible at this point in your life too? Of like so I do jiu-jitsu and I try to make the 11 o'clock class because that works better in my schedule. Whereas my husband goes to boxing and so he goes when he gets out of work. So it's what works in your day and what works in your schedule. Now, if making a specific time doesn't work, okay, are you taking kids to an activity that you really don't have to sit on the sidelines and you could go walk while they're sitting there doing their activity?
Mhm.
Like it's finding ways to incorporate your own health within your life.
It's beautiful. And I just thought of a personal example in my own life where one of my sons, I would bring him to karate. And for a while, I would sit and I would watch him. And sometimes the classes were very, very long and they didn't really engage me much where I could really, benefit from supporting him or cheering him on because it was much more of him, working one-on-one with his instructor, whatever it is. So I did like just what you said. Instead of sitting there, I started to making it a routine. I would just get out of the building and I would literally walk laps around the karate studio for however long. And that fulfilled my exercise need, where, he was getting what he needed while I was also able to get what I need. So it's about finding like creative ways that you can infuse things that are important to you throughout your day without having to give up on something without having to, or another person in your family to have to sacrifice for you to do it. Like it is possible. Once you figure out what's a priority to you and writing it down, I agree with you. When you write it down, you give it power. Like, okay, like this is like almost a contract I'm making with myself. If I say I want to exercise, then I'm going to find time in my day to move. If it has to be when I'm walking around the karate studio for me, that's what my exercise is going to be. And that's okay. It's all good.
And that's it. That's being okay with what it looks like.
Mhm.
Because it may not be walking around the karate studio, make it boring, but at the same time, you're still getting your movement in and you're getting that exercise. And so it may just look different than what you thought it was going to look like. And I think that's where writing it down really helps. You can write down what you would ideally look like, but okay, this is my time constraints. That's what works really well. Me and my brother, when we were teaching at a gym that he owned, we watched, there were a few different moms that would, for a little while, they came and they sat there, but then after a while, they would drop them off and then go exercise and then come back right at the end of class and get to see the very end. But it was really interesting just to watch that of they started their own discipline while their kids were doing something. And so really when you start doing that, you're also showing an example of it's still something that's important.
Exactly. And your kids are watching you 24/7 and learning from you. And if you live by example 100%. And so like I think for a lot of parents out there, they might have a little bit of guilt, especially us moms. Like I need to like be doing like this is what society says is how it means to be a successful mom or a good mom. But no, like you showing that you are prioritizing your own mental health, physical health, whatever it is leading by example for your children and giving them permission as they get older to self-love and prioritize their own needs and know that it's not selfish. And that's just wonderful for the next generation to empower them and to let's normalize this relationship with self, this self-love that has been like something that we don't really talk about. And let's make it so it's more accessible and it's just a normal part of life. Like, what did you do today to take care of yourself? Like try to make that part of your conversation with your partner or your children. What did you do today to honor yourself or to show up for yourself and to really make that part of our new routine, part of our new habit?
And so if you're making it a part of your day, you're showing it by example to the other people in your life,
Mhm.
to the and it's that's one that can go into boundaries of like, okay, these are so for me, this is the time I go to do jujitsu. Well, then it's not available for other things. Like it's
Mhm.
going ahead and saying, nope, that time's not available for this. And it's not saying, because you have to remember that when you're saying no or yes, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to yourself. So like you have to put it into a perspective of, does this affect what one of my goals is to say yes to the other person? And sometimes it may be. Sometimes it may be that you have to in those times, but it doesn't mean it has to be all the time. And it doesn't mean that it has to take over what you need to do for yourself. Because so I asked a question in the beginning of my business to a few people, and then it ended up asking over 200 people of how do you not let yourself vanish? And it became a very interesting question because some people know exactly how they don't let themselves vanish within a relationship. Some people have never ever thought about it. Some people know exactly how they let themselves vanish and disappear. And so it's that whole thing of you can't build a strong relationship with yourself if you've kind of let yourself disappear and vanish. And it's never too late to find that person again. And they might look different than what they did 10 years ago, and that's okay too.
Great question. I love that question. There's so much wisdom to be learned from that. Like even just as you said it now, I'm thinking, okay, like how did I let myself vanish or not? And what does that mean? And you can learn so much about yourself, about your relationship, about your partner, and that's a really awesome starting point. I love that.
Yeah. Well, and so from those questions and all those answers, I took it and like analyzed it.
Mhm.
And the themes I came up with was focusing on what makes you unique, of like people would let themselves, like their unique part of themselves go. So how do you kind of maintain that? Looking at what finances look like
Mhm.
how do you kind of maintain some of your financial independence and communication? Boundaries was a big one
Mhm.
of people sometimes just let boundaries get overrun. Self-love was another big one. And then that respect of your personal balance and relations. So it's really cool. And I have a free course that's building that strong relationship with yourself with a guide I built out of it. But it was really interesting of like those people, the responses were just all over the place. But out of that came these 6 different core themes,
That is so
either from people that had let themselves vanish in that way or people that's how they didn't let themselves vanish. It's very interesting.
That's so cool that you were able to quantify and tabulate and put into categories the responses from this. That's like, I could totally nerd out on that with you, what that looks like. And you said there's a free course that you offer for people to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's so if you go to my stackedintent.com website to the Stacked Intent course suite, it's the first course on there.
Beautiful. I will be sure to include that in the episode notes for people to check it out. Can you share any other things that you would like people to know about how they can work with you or events that you have coming up that you wanted to speak about?
So, how you can work with me, I've got 4 courses there's some that'll run some specials of like I'm accessible, but they're kind of at your self-paced so that you can kind of work at them as it works for you. And then I've got workshops and being a keynote speaker that you can just kind of reach out and I can come and do. And the beauty of my business is I can travel anywhere, and which I love to do. And then in November, I have a retreat that's happening, and that I'm really excited about because I'm doing that with Ashley and Sarah, who are on my podcast. And it's a retreat that is designed for just rediscovering your authentic self. And so it's going to be 4 days, 3 nights of really looking at who you are and who you want to be moving forward. And we're going to do that through workshops. We're going to do it through giving you some tools. You're going to have time for self-reflection. And then the really cool thing about this one is the food is going to be kind of a community done. And so we're going to talk about meal prep, talk about what it looks like to do some hands-on prepping of your own food and how that's important. And so it's done. It's at a place that's in central Georgia, and there's like geodomes, and then there's a sauna there. There's a pool there, but we're doing it in November, so I might be more over at the fire pit than the pool because it's gonna be cold, but that's okay. And then it's just coming together and bringing together a group of women to spend some days together, get to know each other, and then you get to go home with some tools. And the one beautiful thing I think about retreats is you're coming for a soul focus. And so it allows you to really focus on this one thing. And then you get to take it back into your life and figure out how to incorporate it and weave it throughout your life. And we're doing it before the holidays so that you can really establish some of it before you get into the holidays of November and December.
That sounds like a magical experience, and the timing could not be better right before the holidays to carve out some time to be with yourself, cultivate that relationship with yourself, and surround yourself with some like-minded women who are going to help to inspire you and lift you up and encourage you and cheer you on. That sounds incredible.
It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So that's those resources. All my resources can be found at stackedintent.com. And then you can join my email list. And I send out a weekly email that it gives you self-care, lifestyle, organization, and a motivation on either relationship, nutrition, finance, or an other topic. And so I cover those like in a rotation. And we just finished talking about non-negotiables. And then I know in March we're going to talk about red flags. So like red flags in relationships, red flags in your nutrition, red flags in your finance. So I kind of try to find a theme and then we talk through it. So you and a lot of what's in my email I don't put anywhere else just so that that's where you get that part.
It's wonderful. That sounds like such like tangible advice that you're giving to people to sign up for your newsletter that are really interesting and cover a wide variety of topics that you can incorporate into your lives right away. Becca Stackhouse-Morson, thank you so much for joining me on this episode today. It has been a pleasure talking with you and learning about the wonderful things that you're offering for your clients and for the impact that you are creating. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.